Whether it's that particular kind of thrill, the one that comes from horror without shape, or that grandiose power fantasy, the kind that can only be satiated by imagining power beyond limit, witchcraft remains one of the most common and timeless elements in storytelling. Film, being a medium which can show us anything, is especially good at portraying the pros and cons, the good and evil of witches and their power. In this video, I'm going to list and examine some of the best examples of this, where great writing and filmmaking meet great folklore and metaphysics. Without further ado, here's the list of top 13 films about witches and witchcraft. Number 13, The Craft. The 90s chic with this one is incredible. Not only is it a time capsule of the era, but it's also a vision of witchcraft and the occult as filtered through the minds and concerns of 4 teenagers. The team drama, which is effectively all this film is elevated by its supernatural elements, so that the intensity and self-referential nature of youth is maximized, or even possibly examined with the sense of gravity that the subject has always deserved. I was young when this goth alternative style was common in our culture, seeing it mostly in the teenagers who passed me by as I was on my way to elementary school. And though I always felt a little fear at seeing these darkly clad older figures, now, watching the movie as an adult, I see them for what they were. Kids, albeit older than I was, trying to find themselves. Witches, being figures of society's unfeeling scorn, are the perfect metaphor for this familiar coming-of-age story. That's why I think this one deserves a spot. Number 12, Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. Probably the worst movie on the list in terms of absolute quality, though I do like it. It's also such a perfect portrayal of not only dark and mysterious evil, itself secluded in a tiny pocket of the world, stirring its glowing broth as though everything continues on around it. But it's also a great example of witchcraft as it would manifest itself in the modern consumer economy. The realism of the specifics in this story aside, the broad idea of evil shrouding itself in commercialism, rolling in it with pride and glee, only using our own need to consume against us, is kinda brilliant. The child sacrifice element, loosely based on Julius Caesar's description of druidic practices in France and the British Isles, is stomach churning, leading to the most memorable scene in the movie. I don't believe in the supernatural, but if I did, this is the version of it I'd expect and fear most, hence why it deserves its spot here at number 12. Number 11, Throne of Blood. I think the best portrayal of witches in literature are the 3 witches in Macbeth. I think the best portrayal of Macbeth in film is Akira Kurosawa's Throne of Blood. The theme of the preordained here, the unavoidability of fate, a prominent element of magic in fiction, is done beautifully in all versions of this story. But Kurosawa's classic, with its elaborate, chaotic, but deliberate mise-en-scene, takes the cake. The atmosphere here, smoky and ethereal, floats over us like the mist which crawls past its scenery. Like the Coen brothers' version of the film, 3 witches here are merged into one, but it's that solitary voice, her presence locked within a cage, which is more effective, because it gives her the authority that comes with being unique, being one with the wilderness. The witch here doesn't just foretell of doom, she brings doom by foretelling it. Her evil is deliberate, and its implications, in true Shakespearean fashion, are profound. Number 10, The Wizard of Oz. Probably the most iconic portrayal of the archetype in question. The Wizard of Oz not only has the Wicked Witch of the West, but it also contains her opposite, Glinda, the Good Witch, establishing for its young audience that for every evil in this world, there's a good to oppose it. The Wicked Witch, beyond her famous lines, also stalks through some of Golden Era Hollywood's most recognizable sets. Her flying monkeys are chimeric figures of great imagination and insight. Their nature as lesser humans, and therefore the perfect servants, is also what makes them so terrifying. Again, the movie counterbalances its archetypal evil with archetypal good, and Glinda's virtues, which even include the virtue of deliverance, are similarly great and iconic. Number 9, The Witches. Separating witches from the basic structure of fairy tale is difficult. It's possible, obviously, but there's always some element, some well-worn cliche, which brings a writer back to the character's folklore roots. Bringing witches out of the pre-modern past, though, that seems to be much easier. The Witches, originally a book by Roald Dahl, has all the taboo-raising and moralizing of classic children's stories, but is put in the painfully mundane modern setting of a seaside hotel, one equipped with a convenient ballroom, the type that's useful for the get-togethers of any secret society. In the hands of director and cinematographer Nicholas Roeg, the movie contains all these fantastic elements, each contained with adept visual flair. There's a reason why so many of these scenes are burned into the memories of people who watched it way too young. The fact that the witches were vocally and actively hostile to children couldn't have helped either. Number 6, The Love Witch. The second most visually striking movie on this list, The Love Witch is an experiment in recapturing the magic of classic horror filmmaking. It's not a perfect movie by any stretch, but I prefer it over movies much more polished. It's a feminist film, and while identifying it as such is pretty easy, it's also hard to determine what the specific nature of its message is. This adds to the movie in my mind. By playing with these ideas in our minds as they're expressed on screen, we reconjure the imagery, which is spellcraft in of itself. The classic tropes of witchcraft, love, femininity, and sexuality sexuality are all here. And I think that given the origin of these things as political issues in the 60s and 70s, the film's aesthetic is more than just window dressing. Number 5. Black Sunday. Atmospheric, moody, Italian, what's not to love? Black Sunday is both a witch movie and a haunting movie. Its brilliant gothic sets haunted by the aggrieved specter of a witch. Famous for its opening scene, the movie follows through on it with characters fated to suffer for the sins, or the perceived sins, of the witch's mob of persecutors. Bava's knack for atmosphere and visuals elevate this one to both a work of art and to a work of sleazy spectacle. Perhaps his best movie, and one of the best movies about the evils of witchcraft ever made. Number 7. Rosemary's Baby. This movie is only so low on the list because its elements of witchcraft are its least interesting aspect. Rosemary's Baby is an obvious masterpiece, a movie wound together from pure paranoia. I'm not going to talk too much about this one, as many people mistake the plot's greatest twist for its general synopsis, a product of the film's success in embedding itself in the larger culture. If you haven't seen this film, don't read up too much about it. One thing I will say though is that the movie, having one foot in the camp of its supernatural threat being real, and the other in the notion that everything that happens is a byproduct of Rosemary's paranoia, and I don't care what is shown at the end, the truth in either regard is never definitely established in films of this type, lends itself perfectly to the idea of witches as subtle and unseen instigators of doom. The Blair Witch Project. This was a movie I was slow to getting around to. Maybe I had an aversion to found footage horror that I wasn't aware of, or maybe hearing the opinions of those who existed within the post-buzz backlash of this movie tainted my expectations. Either way, when I finally got around to watching this one, I was kind of blown away. The Blair Witch Project is definitely a scary film, though even the scariest of movies aren't really that scary in my opinion. What The Blair Witch does, which is uniquely impressive in my mind, is that it builds tension with its performances and its filmmaking. By having the titular Blair Witch exist as something unseen, her presence becomes universal. Its energy felt in every rock, tree branch, or pine needle. The tension between the characters, their growing distaste and resentment for one another, is something which is prodded by this horrible presence off screen. The most interesting thing about witches isn't the witches themselves, it's the power they wield. This film, by keeping our attention solely on that power, maximizes its own. Number 4. Kiki's Delivery Service. Like many of Miyazaki's other great films, this one is a coming-of-age story. Miyazaki's genius is the way he elevates the universality of this story structure by plugging it into a supernatural context, and doing it, in at least half of his films, in a way that doesn't erode the slice-of-life nature of those stories. Kiki is a slow movie. Its conflict is small, its scope is small, its wonderful moments are lived in and sweet rather than tense or operatic, and I think I speak for many others when I say I wouldn't have it any other way. Compared to something like The Craft, Kiki uses witchcraft to tell a story not necessarily for its edge or subtext, but for the sake of its own high-flying whimsy. Number 3. Suspiria. Colorful, otherworldly, and violent, this is the first film I thought of when I came up with this list idea. Beyond just being a great horror movie, I think Suspiria is an even greater example of a fairy tale on film. Its dollhouse atmosphere and vivid color scheme really does remind me of my most freakish nightmares, and its vision of witches as conspiratorial shadows in the night and as plain-clothed authority figures during the day was exactly how I imagined them in my childhood. Combining the folklore of witches with the artistry of ballet is kind of brilliant, and while it's surprising that the movie doesn't do much with this premise, I'm glad that it's there in the background. The remake expands upon this idea beautifully, but it's really the trashy giallo shamelessness which makes the original such an immediate powerhouse, one which, thanks to modern restorations, has only grown in reputation over the years. Number 2. Hakusan. Witchcraft Throughout the Ages. Somehow the strangest film on a list of already strange films. Hakusan is both documentary and mockumentary. It's a movie which warns of witchcraft while also warning of the dangers of persecuting people based on superstition. Why the movie ends up being so divided in its purpose, I couldn't tell you, but I can tell you that I wouldn't have it any other way. Out of all the films in this list of moving paintings, this one somehow ends up being the most visually inventive, at least in some regards. This is probably just a product of it being released in the silent era, a time when these forms of visual maximalism were ideal given how new and exciting film as a medium was at the time. Because of this visual maximalism, the movie has the most brilliant and fully realized portrayal of the hellish and satanic aspects of witchcraft and sorcery ever conceived on film. Its frames stuffed with the bodies and faces of bloated demons, their feverish aspects dragged almost as if by witchcraft itself out of the annals of medieval demonology and into the physical form to be admired, hopefully forever, on screen. Not a perfect fit for those who prefer their 3-act structures, but for those of us who are more tolerant of experimentation to form, this film is one of the most rewarding on the list, and more than that, the most thorough in its exploration of the subject matter. Number 1. The Witch. The reason why this film is ranked number 1 on this list has less to do with its absolute quality, although that alone would qualify it for the best, and more to do with just how superlative an example this film is for witches visually, conceptually, culturally, and thematically. Period and location have a lot to do with this, setting it at a time when witches were not only universally believed to be real, but when serious headspace was reserved to the subject of what to do about them. What makes this film so impressive, and this is a quality of Robert Eggers' films more generally, is how seriously it takes its characters and their perspectives, doing so largely without judgment or snobbery. In this film, witches and witchcraft are real phenomena. The family involved really do live on the edge of a forest, alive with the active and invisible tendrils of a witch's power and influence. Just like Huxon, the film then becomes both a movie about witches themselves, as well as a film about witches as a psychological and cultural phenomenon more broadly. Like Suspiria and the Blair Witch, this movie is scary, perhaps the scariest of all three. It has all the thematic sophistication and attention to craft seen in Huxon and The Love Witch, but it does all of this with the lightness of touch seen in neither. This is arguably the best film on the list, but even if one were to disagree with that, it's hard to disagree with it being the most emblematic of the topic overall.